roll again.
I'd like to welcome everyone here today for this workshop. And Mr. Chad Meadows, he is going to fill us in on what's been going on, and this, I'll turn it over to our city manager, Greg Patterson.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Just to recap, Mr. Chad Meadows is here with Code Bright. Just to recall, or to review where we are, back in March, we entered into an agreement with Mr. Meadows to do this work. So he is in here yesterday and today. And yesterday morning was spent with staff, the mayor and myself, over things and discussing things. And then yesterday we met with the steering committee for about 2 hours, and then spent yesterday afternoon on a driving tour with planning staff, and then spent time on a walking tour gathering photos. And then he got some photos at Robert last night during the nighttime of some lighting and things as well. Today he's had 7 stakeholder meetings, and those meetings consist of retail, arts and crafts, attractions, restaurants, hospitality and lodging, restaurants, and the aesthetics committee. So with that being said, Chad, I'll turn it over to you to talk about your day.
Well, that's 2 days.
2 days.
So I got all your problems answered. 2 days, no problem. Got it all solved. So thanks for the chance to come out and talk with you guys. Wanted to, we're doing a series of trips out here. This process is driven by my trips out to Gatlinburg. Each one is, well, the majority of them are multiple day trips, and they all sort of end, or we have a capstone of presentation to you guys about where we are and what we did and what happens next. And so this is the first of several of these discussions. And I have a very brief PowerPoint. Don't get worried or whatever about what you see. I put that together. We have not yet put together a project branding platform. We have talked about the project name, but we're still working on logos, and we're still working on colors. So this is just my shot at this from a few days ago. So, all right, let's jump in. Go ahead. I want to talk a little bit about the project background, just to refresh y'all's memory. I know I was here a few months ago and gave you an overview of the contract. I'll just talk a little bit about the work program and the project goals. I want to share with you some of the things that we covered with the steering committee in the first meeting yesterday. And I'll talk about some patterns and observations from the 7 stakeholder interviews that we've had thus far. I doubt any of these will be a surprise for you, but it's nice to have a short list. And then finally, we'll talk about next steps, webpage, and where we go from here. So go ahead. This is our project scope. There's 8 tasks to the scope. We are in initiation. That is our first task. We'll finish it in May. The project initiation task includes a review of your current regulation. It also includes the preparation of a website. So we are preparing a project website for Elevate Gatlinburg. It will be one that we maintain over the life of the project. It'll include details on the project, FAQs, how to participate, copies of work product, etc. So we'll be pushing this out in the coming days and weeks. It'll be the one-stop source for information on this project. And I'm sure that we'll try to support this with some of the other PIO efforts that Seth is involved in. So initiation. From here we move to character. We're trying to identify what is the community character of Gatlinburg that we want to embrace, that we want to protect, that we want to encourage, and perhaps most importantly, what we don't think is community character. What is it that we wish to discourage going forward? Task 3 will be complete in August of this year. It's the assessment, and essentially what that is with an understanding of the community's desire for character, how do your current regulations in the MZO, your subdivision regulations, and the city code of ordinances stack up against that community character concept? Are we going to wind up with development that is what we say we want it to be in light of our current code? What's the gap between what our regulations call for and what we want? That's what the assessment task is all about. Task 4 is options. Once we figure out the missing parts of your current regulations, okay, what follows is the fact that there will be a series of options for addressing those problems. You can zig or you can zag. So for example, let's say, just for the sake of argument, that we decide we'd like to have buildings that are closer to the street or that embrace the sidewalk in a more significant way. Our regulations have a 15-foot setback or a 20-foot setback. We'd like to have more presence on the street for buildings. So how do we do that? Well, there's a variety of ways we can change setbacks. We could require or ask people to do outdoor gathering areas. We could make some other change. I'm just picking on setbacks. I have no idea if that's the rule or the change that needs to be made. I'm just saying that no matter what, for most of the provisions that we'll see described in the assessment, there'll be a series of options for how we get there. This options task is a discussion about pros and cons of which option we take. I'll give you a real world example, or at least one that I think you're likely to explore in a little bit more detail, are incentives to encourage smaller existing storefronts to come into compliance with new aesthetic requirements. Perhaps the town might consider a blend of mandates, incentives, or even a facade grant program to assist people, the smaller developments, with coming into compliance. Those are all options for the table. There's probably a few others. Y'all need to hear what are the costs involved, what are the possibilities of this, what's practical, what's impractical, pros and cons, and that's what options is about. When we've talked through in October what the options are going to be and what our preferred strategy is going to be, only then will we start drafting. Will we start drafting your new ordinance. And there are likely to be significant changes. Will we redo the entire ordinance? I don't know. I'm not sure yet. Certainly there's parts of your current municipal zoning ordinance that are outside the scope of this project. That said, there's probably some things that maybe we need to explore as part of this project that might be outside the scope, but that we still need to go ahead and address. And I'm not sure what those things are going to be yet, but that's something for us to explore. In any case, in January of 2025, approximately, we're in May now, so about 7 months from now, you'll have a draft of your new municipal zoning ordinance. We'll integrate into your current zoning ordinance all of the changes so that you don't have multiple documents floating around. There will certainly be some other changes to help kind of user friendliness and help you navigate the document. We'll float that out to the community January, February. In March, we'll do a revision, okay, based on what we hear from folks when we're out here January, February, talking about the draft. We'll make some revisions. Once we've got the revised LMO pulled together, we'll want to commence with the adoption process, which we think will happen, basically in April and perhaps into May. Meeting with Planning Commission, a couple of meetings with you guys, adoption, and then ultimately delivery. That is our project scope. We're about a year out. Okay. I don't know, next slide, please. Here are some project goals. This is the first time that you've seen some of this information, and this is just my stab at it. I look forward to amending these, enhancing them where necessary. Obviously, raising the bar for development quality generally, attracting the next generation of visitors to Gatlinburg, encouraging redevelopment in existing areas, making the regulations more predictable, and to the extent that we can, addressing livability concerns for residents. So those are some pretty broad statements, some broad strokes of what kinds of things we would expect this project to result in. Okay, questions about those? Okay. So as Greg mentioned, we have a steering committee that is providing us high-level project guidance. They're giving us first blush reactions at work products. They are also responsible for keeping their various constituencies informed about where the project is. These folks have wide networks. They talk to a lot of people, and the expectation is that steering committee members will share project progress, will share ups, downs, positives, negatives with the community in the hope of keeping everybody informed as we go forward. One thing that we do want to hold true, no matter what, throughout this project, with the office hours meetings that we're having, with the 5 public forums that we're having, with the web page, with the numerous stakeholder committee meetings, with the focus groups. If you didn't share your views with us in this project, it's because you didn't want to. It's not because we didn't ask, and it's not because we didn't make that available. It's very, very important for the public to be involved in this project. They are front and center for us, and we will make numerous efforts at reaching out to them and making sure that they have an opportunity to share their views. Okay? Here are some of the steering committee initial concerns, and they are in no particular order, and it's very much stream of consciousness from my notes. We'll enhance this and bring a little bit more clarity and organization to it in the trip notes that I'll prepare next week. So obviously identifying and protecting community character was something that the steering committee thought was a good idea. Attracting a higher quality of visitors, folks who are here with a greater likelihood of expending more of their discretionary income while in the city. Addressing building architectural guidelines, addressing aesthetics generally. Specifically, addressing lighting, signage, business appearance. The ability that you have as a premier tourism destination to use your special grandfathering authority to the city's advantage, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Being sure that no matter what happens, we produce an actionable product. This is not a dusty plan that sits on the shelf. This is the black letter law. Your staff will be using these rules and regulations on a daily basis. So the current rules have a lot of suggestions, not a lot of standards, and that's something that we would consider we explore. Maybe we need to convert some of these guidelines and suggestions from mays or shoulds to shalls to musts. We need to protect the people who live here too, that it's not just the business community, but there are also residents here who have concerns, have issues, and want those issues to be addressed by the city as soon as possible. One of those topics that many people mentioned is overnight rentals, and I understand that's a very sticky wicket. There is a lot of stuff bound up in overnight rentals. How we address them, I don't know, it's too soon to tell, but it's certainly something that has been mentioned many times, and we can explore the possibility of addressing. A plan for the public realm. This came up many, many times. That area that's at the back of the sidewalk, but not yet to the front door of the building, along Parkway, along kind of public streets. There's this kind of transformation area, transitional area between the edge of the sidewalk and the front of the building. There may still be paving there may not be, but a lot of concerns about how that area functions, how it looks, how it contributes to people's ability to enjoy themselves in Gatlinburg. So certainly something that came up. Also a request to bring some example success stories. Communities who have embraced community character and used that as a regulatory tool. Success stories from other resort destinations who've bootstrapped their way into higher market share and a series of clientele who are spending more money while they visit. So some initial concerns from the steering committee. Let's go ahead on. Extra slide, sorry. Stakeholder interviews. As Greg mentioned, we talked to 7 folks. Retail, arts, crafts, attractions, restaurants, lodging. I'll say to you, I have done many, many, many stakeholder interviews over the arc of my career. I found these to be among the most enjoyable I've ever had. The people that your staff identified for me to speak with made my day many, many times. You have some very passionate, very smart people who care about this community, and that is by far your best resource. The people who live here and who care enough to come to these meetings or spend time with me, that's gold. And I learned a lot, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have those conversations. It was very, very beneficial. And now I'm going to tell you some of the things they said. So, there was a point made, and these are points that were made by others, not made by me, but I think they're worth the consideration. Downtown rents may be impacting the ability to have locally made products. Okay, so there's a perception out there that a lot of products that are available in Gatlinburg for purchase are available for purchase in anywhere USA. And what makes Gatlinburg unique? Why would I come to Gatlinburg to buy something that I could buy at Walmart? That's a good question. Why is that so? Is downtown rent part of that problem? I don't know. Sign overload. This notion that, after a while, there's so many signs everywhere that you don't even see them anymore. And in our pursuit of additional signage and additional visibility, are we actually rendering a condition where people don't see us because there's so much visual activity, so much input that I can't even pay attention anymore? One of the things that I'd like to note for you is that a lot of signage on Parkway is auto-oriented signage, okay? But the vast majority of your clientele who are on Parkway are walking. Okay, so you've got a lot of large signage that's built for people in cars, which is a little bit of a mismatch from your market who's actually out there. The arts and crafts area, very, very interesting aspect of your community, and there is a need for more protection for that part of your community. There is a request for more support for arts and crafts downtown, and a connection between bullet point 3 and bullet point 1, because your arts and crafts community is producing goods and products that you can't get at Walmart. If I'm coming to Gatlinburg for an experiential shopping visit, then I want to buy things that were made in Gatlinburg. Who makes stuff in Gatlinburg? Your arts and crafts community makes it. There was an observation that nostalgia is a draw to Gatlinburg. And interestingly enough, the particular sense that was highlighted, which I just loved and thought was a great comment, was the smell. The smells of being on the street in Gatlinburg reminded people of what it was like to grow up here. I mean, it's kind of cheesy and it, it's a little cringy, but it's also true, right? How do we deal with this? How do we recognize nostalgia? How does nostalgia relate to raising the bar for quality? Okay, if we've created a community that is unknowable to the people who've been coming here for decades, did we succeed? I don't know. Not sure. I think that's an interesting observation. Limits on corporate and franchise architecture. Being part of Gatlinburg and being part of the community character means fitting in and meshing. It doesn't mean what a lot of architects want to do, which is grab your attention with their beautiful architecture. Okay? There was a question about whether or not there's a need for more use-related controls. You guys are already doing this. You're doing it for tattoo parlors, or you've done it for tattoos. You've done it for moonshine. Are there other uses that it might be time to consider doing this with? Maybe. More structured parking. Parking is a perennial problem. I do not know a single group who didn't show up and say parking is a problem. I know you guys know that. So I'm looking at your watch and telling you what time it is. Perhaps there should be more structured parking, but can the market support it? Can your market support parking structures at $40,000 or $50,000 a space? I'm not sure. Is there a role for the city in participation in provision of structured parking? Maybe. So the sidewalks look dirty, and there were several groups who said that. I think that there's a recognition that the city is working harder and having some success cleaning the sidewalks. The problem is there's this public realm split, right? There's the sidewalk, that first 6 feet or 8 feet, whatever it happens to be from the back of the curb, and then there's something else that's not the sidewalk. But the residents, the visitors, they don't understand that distinction. To them, it's the sidewalk. But to you, that's not city property. So how do we reconcile this? What needs to be done, if anything, to address this sort of sidewalks look dirty issue? Cost of facade improvement, used as a justification for not improving. I'm small, been here forever, my business is going just fine, I don't need to worry about improving. I don't need that for my business's success. Well, there's the larger question of the city's success and your role in that. Is there a way for the city to leverage more participation in facade improvement excuse me, through a facade grant program? Perhaps that's something that we could explore. That's been used to great effect. So those are some of the things that the stakeholders said that are directly related to the scope of this project. Okay? And then there's some things that maybe are a little bit beyond the scope of the project, but are related nonetheless, right? Overnight rentals being one. Employee housing being one. The fact that there's not much of it. The cost of housing. How do we get the workers to the jobs if the employee housing is a long way away? How do we deal with shifts? How do we deal with other aspects of life? These are good questions. Obviously the parking issue, lack thereof, traffic congestion. The resident group had a lot to say about traffic congestion. What all this points to is expectation management. It is important for me, for you, to manage the expectations of the community on the outcomes of this process, right? What are the salient project aspects that we're going to deal with? What are the things that are out there that we recognize that we know we need to deal with, but that we are either going to deal with later or that we're going to try to incorporate into this project? And if there are those things that we incorporate into the project, what are those and how are we going to handle that? So that's something for us to talk about. We have 12 months, we have a set budget, we have a set scope. Some of these issues are complicated, to say the least. So how do we manage this is definitely something that's in the back of my mind, and I think it's important for all of us to be thinking about. Okay, that's it for the input. Did you see anything there that surprises you? Did you see, are there any instances where you thought you'd see something that you didn't see? Or what's missing? Nothing missing? Everything cool? Okay. Let's talk about anticipated outcomes. I mentioned earlier that we're updating your zoning ordinance, potentially your subdivision regulations. These changes will be woven into the document. So it's not that we're tossing out what you have today, it's that we're going into what you have and making it better. We expect to, in tasks 2 and 3, identify and agree upon community character. And then we anticipate using community character as the basis for change. Okay, so community character will become the foundation for some of the development regulations and aesthetic controls that we're anticipating. I have talked before, and I think we need to consider the use of incentives to embrace change. Okay, we need to give people a reason to embrace change other than I said so. Okay. I also think that we should establish at some point a short list of narrow prohibitions, things that are happening in the community now that we'd like to see stopped. And you can fill in the blank in terms of what that might be. I also think that once you've gotten the regulations adopted, you should start the amortization clock. What the heck is that? The amortization clock is a time period after which somebody who has a site feature or other aspect of their development that is not in compliance with the regulation has to remove it. Okay? Most amortization periods last for 3 years. Okay, that's the standard. It doesn't have to be 3 years. It could be shorter, it could be longer. Can I adopt different amortization periods for different things? Sure, but that's complicated. You have to track it. The point is, identify community character, use that as the basis for your rules, offer some incentives for people who aren't meeting community character, encourage, establish some prohibitions as sort of staking out your ground, and start the clock. If you're among the uses that are in these prohibitions, your days are numbered. We're going to give you some incentives to try to come into compliance with the rules. You've got a time period within which you can try to affect that change. And if for some reason, after the incentives that we've offered and the time period that we've given you, it's not enough, then the city needs to explore what its options are at that point. I do not think you should be punitive if somebody goes past the amortization period and hasn't gotten their act together or hasn't been able to meet the standard. I think you should still give them the incentive, but I do think that you should take whatever actions are appropriate. I think this will be a gradual process. I think we do need to prioritize this. There's probably 3 or 4 things that we should focus on in terms of the aesthetics and bringing new development into line with what we want to talk about. You have a leveraging tool in terms of non-conforming grandfather development and your ability to use amortization. Use it, okay? Use it. You have the authority to do it. Those are some of the anticipated outcomes. Where do we go from here? Webpage, I mentioned that earlier, www.elevategatlinburg.com, okay? That will have information on the project, information on how to get involved, FAQs, draft work programs, draft products, things like this presentation, things like the trip notes that I'm getting ready to produce, things like the summary stakeholder report that I'm preparing based on the meetings that we had today. That sort of information, and we'll be maintaining that over the course of the project. The trip notes from this trip that explain who I met with and what was said. Task 2, which starts now and runs through July, is the character task. Our attempt here is to use graphic and textual description of the community character that we want to encourage and that which we want to discourage. So, how do we do that? Well, my job is to assemble for you some options. Is this consistent with community character? Is this consistent with community character? Yes, no, yes, no. Asking you guys some questions. And then taking your answers and condensing that down into hopefully a brief but cogent analysis of this is what we mean when we say that is an appropriate style for Gatlinburg. And I don't know what that's going to be yet, but my guess is there'll probably be some different styles for different uses, perhaps some different styles for different kinds of buildings. We'll see. That'll be happening over the months of May to July. My next visit here is in July. We have a preview call with the steering committee and that request for examples of other communities who've used community character successfully and bootstrapped their way to success, which we'll be preparing before I come out in July. And that's really about it. I know I'm about out of time, but I wanted to share this with you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm very optimistic that this is going to be a successful project. I think there's some really good things that we can do for Gatlinburg, and I'm excited to work with a group of people. I find your staff to be very efficient, they're very helpful, very knowledgeable, and a pleasure to work with. So I'm all aces here. I think you got a great community, and certainly you got an awesome city. I mean, it's awesome. So with that, do you guys have any questions?
Anybody? That you want to share?
This steering committee, you all met and talked about parking. has that not improved quite a bit with new parking spaces, new parking lots?
I'm not sure we actually talked about parking yesterday as much as you heard about parking today. So the steering committee, not so much about parking, Mark, Vice Mayor. But also I think it's a little confusing whether we're talking visitor parking or employee parking. And I think it was a little bit confusing, Chad, that you seem to have parking in scope in one of your slides, and then the next slide you said parking wasn't. So I know you did it relatively quickly today. I think parking was a point. So anyway, I think we need to be careful. We're talking about both, but we're certainly different. It's a different conversation whether you visitor parking.
I understand employee parking.
Yeah,
I know that's a problem.
But if you ask me personally, I think visitor parking, there's a lot of, I don't know how often we're maxed, to your point. I think people want more convenient to where they want to be, not necessarily the other end of town, and they also just don't want to pay. But employee parking is always a hot subject.
There's not enough.
But that's not in his scope.
That's the bigger issue.
But that's not zoning or in Chad's scope, which I think is going to be the confusing part of this. Is there's a lot of things up there that really aren't, it's confusing whether they're in the scope of work or not, to me. And I think the community wants, I think the good news is the community is very passionate and wants a lot of things done. So are they going to be expecting too much out of a limited scope? That's a question I've got. I think we should be real careful how we portray to the community what his deliverables are going to end up being. As we see, we keep coming back to basically rewriting the zoning, not rewriting the whole book, but modifying a lot of the rules and regulations of how you build and what your signage looks like. But we throw in a lot of things about living in residential lives and parking and housing, and it's not in this scope.
Fair points, and that's something that we should explore. My concern is that your residential community may think that the building appearance is just fine and dandy. But boy, I sure would like it if you do something about the overnight rental problem next door to me. Those are going to be the decision points that you guys are faced with. I would rather not have public discontent about this project because they perceive that we're not addressing their issues. And so that's why I put that out there. I think that Robert is exactly right. There is a major potential for scope creep here. There are a lot of problems and issues and concerns that we need to address. Some of them are related to, why we're here in the first place, which is, pursuit of visitor clientele who's going to leave more of their discretionary income in Gatlinburg, right? But there's a lot of different stuff that goes along with that. A lot of things that we also have to think about. I wouldn't tell you about the overnight rental, except every single person mentioned it. It came up at every single steering committee meeting. So I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that that was something that's on people's minds.
Did Jeff leave?
We have here, sir.
We have overnight rentals in R1, right?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to hear from the rest of the group a little bit.
I think interesting, he brought up at our studies committee meeting prior to this, that some of the problems we have are not in his scope. Also, some things that we talked about, just getting started is stuff that would have to be done out of his scope. Because otherwise, there's so many little things that can be done prior. Cleanliness, enforcing, I don't know how you would write it, enforcing the cleanliness downtown. The small signage issues we have that are everywhere. Stuff like that. That we've already started with the windows, but then, do we need to do something about, we're all this way in our business. If you make me take down those lights, I'm gonna figure out some other kind of way to light up my business. Is that gonna be a problem down the road that we can stop right now? With that, before we get started. Otherwise, we would have never had to call him if we had started this like 40 years ago, like was said earlier by Kirby. And we need to be more proactive and think ahead.
Mark, what do you
We're all
think?
that way. We're gonna do whatever thing we can to push the limits.
Yeah, I think we need to look beyond our city limits for assistance with, DeKalb County for housing and future employees here. I think it's important we have a good relationship with them now, but I think going forward, it's gonna need to, continue to improve. But I'm just happy we're getting started and doing some things. And I think what we did, what you all approved, the last few months with the signed ordinances, I think that we're definitely seeing some improvements already. And I think guests and residents are noticing.
Logan?
Well, I mean, I would kind of echo what Robert said is, what the expectations of delivery, and what actually is going to be delivered, and making sure that we, that the public and everybody understands what we're truly going to get from, from this process, and not have an expectation of these other elements unless we are going to try to address these other elements. Another concern I have is the ordinance as a whole. I know we're going to look at trying to modify, but this ordinance was put into place, zoning ordinance, how many years? 50 years ago?
About, yes, sir.
So, there are a lot of changes that have happened in that amount of time, and our city has changed a lot too. So, I worry that we'll miss something if we don't really take a deeper dive into that and trying to rewrite it. Now, I know that's a bigger chunk to deal with, but we are different now, and we are a bigger city. We've got different issues. Lighting is totally different now. And that's just one thing, and building is different too. And if you go through the code and read it, there's a lot of things that are very vague. There's things that can be interpreted different ways. I think there's a lot of areas that could be addressed. And I think this is our opportunity to address them. And obviously it may take a deeper dive from code writer or someone else, but I think it's, obviously we have an opportunity. If we're going to open this door, we're going to address it, we might want to address the whole thing. So I just put that out there.
Jackie, what do you think?
And I think with what, what Robert and Logan said is, he was hired to look at our zoning and our codes, and I think that is what we have to keep in mind. All this stuff that all these groups brought in, I think is very confusing, because they think we're going to be trying to change a lot of that, and I think what he was hired to do was to review our codes and help us update it to what is going to be better for our business community, better for our customers that are coming here, because we want the customer to have the best experience they can when they come to Gatlinburg. And I think that, as Logan said, and I am on planning commission, a lot of the stuff that Jeff and those guys deal with, there's so much gray area. It's all based on interpretation, and it's whoever's interpreting it that day. And I think having him to, revamp it, look at every part of it, that it's important. And to think that it was written 50 years ago and we've made very few changes to it. I serve on a lot of boards, and we review our ordinances and our things like that every 3 years. It's mandatory. And so I think that as we're writing something for the future, we need to remember that too, that building codes change, everything's changing, and we need to have a pattern that it's reviewed by somebody on a set schedule. I think that's important, because I think that any change we make right now is going to be impactful, and I think it's also going to have to be put out there to where we don't mislead people on expectation, because I think that could backfire on us at this point. Because I think a lot of the things, as Robert said, that we've talked about with all these groups are outside of that scope that he was hired to do.
Bo, what do you think?
I don't know if there's much else to say, but I'm in agreement with all of them on this. I think perception is key, both by the residents and the businesses. I think it would be a really bad thing to set the expectations up and then not deliver, or deliver in a way that is harmful to the residents, that helps the businesses. I think that we have to be really clear. I think the website is a great idea. I think it needs to be super accessible, which I think we've all talked about on the CBB board, putting a drop-down tab or something where people that go to Gatlinburg.com have a way to get over there also. But I agree, I think, you know, like everybody said, it would have been nice to do this 60 years ago, but we're here now. And the fact that we're trying to do something is good. I think it's going to be going through this process is one thing, but getting it approved and getting people to buy into it is a whole nother thing. But you've got to start somewhere. And I mean, all these people are making really good points, and we've got to do something, or it's going to get bad. I mean, I've liked everything. I mean, sitting in there talking to him today, to Chad, and I mean, I've liked everything we're working through, but it's going to take this and more, because like you said, there's things that are outside that scope that we may have to do outside that scope on other committees or you guys, but we need to try to tackle it as much as we can here and now, because I mean, if you leave an inch, somebody's going to take a mile. And that's just the way it goes.
Well, one thing that I'm confident in saying is we've got a commission in place now that doesn't want to do a study and put it on some shelf. We want something to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's very positive. And, I was the first one to say it. I think at the first meeting or first Zoom meeting, we do have a community here too. And a strong community makes a strong business community. So, I'm taking one of Logan's quotes. But, I think that we're excited. We've got new staff, people with a lot of energy and want to see something change, something happen in a positive way.
Jackie, what was that study that we did, gosh, it was probably 10 years ago on planning commission remember that, we looked at the city, like basically where we would be going in the future for building and.
It was when we did that housing redevelopment, it was all during all of that, it was right before the wildfires.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
It'd be interesting for you to look at, because it had a lot of good stuff in there about, we're going up, not out.
Right,
And what all that means and how it affects. You know what I'm talking about, Jeff? No.
David Ball.
David Ball.
We can
David.
David would, yeah, David would know.
Maybe get a
That was
copy
a
of
pretty
it.
interesting study.
It was really good.
I've got a question. We've got some people of prominence in here. Who owns the property where the Buffalo used to be now? Do we know? Anybody know? Because that would be a great place for
You're talking-
employee housing.
That's where, part of that's still owned by one family that owned it, that Benny Hammonds has leased from for years to keep it Buffalo. That's the Browns, and then the other side that joins it to the right of, if you're facing the Buffalo, is owned by some local people.
Jack Harton's in on something.
Well,
There's
he
there's
was.
about
I
three,
thought they
there's
sold
three.
it, but then,
The Browns still own the ones where the Buffalo sit, and then one to the right of it is where Jack and Ware and some of these other people.
John Ware.
John.
John Ware was,
I'd heard that they
It's split
sold
up.
it and then evidently didn't go through.
No.
But that would be, I think, a perfect location for employee housing. You know what we're talking about now?
It's not annexed to the city.
Robert?
You have to annex it.
Well, we go right to the
My
stop
sense
sign.
being, through some of this before, sitting on, when we tried to redo the sign ordinance back, Charlene was here, and Foley, and Gerding, and just, through my experience. I think that there's a passion that Gatlinburg can be better by everybody. This thing will get derailed in a hurry if people feel threatened. And I think the key here is to keep the synergy of flourishing by improving without hurting. Now, how that gets totally articulated and how we check those boxes as we go through this is very important. I like that we've got, I actually told this group, he was charged up when we went up to the room at 3 o'clock. And so that to him, his eyes were, to me, he was energized and even more bought in to, wow, this is really a community, and I don't want to say it can be saved, because it don't want to be saved, it can be improved. So I think we've got a, pardon me if I'm calling you a tool, but.
Probably wouldn't be the first.
I'll give it a better word. We have an expert. But you're more than 30 miles away, right?
Indeed.
Okay. We have some experience here, but also, you know, we have to walk this through what generations of people know is best for town. And it's not just us as business owners, it's even the consumers, what, you know, what they want Gatlinburg to be. And I drove through town a couple of different times, last couple of days looking at it. We got a job cut out. I mean, there's a lot of, we're well developed. We're way developed, as we all know. So this isn't something we're just gonna snap our fingers. In 12 months, we're gonna have something. So almost like the word master plan. But again, I think the main point I'm trying to make is how we communicate, Seth, Greg, Chad, Mike, how we communicate to the community what we're really trying to do here without making it sound like we're ready, by golly, to turn everything upside down, shake it out, and put it back over here again. But, so it's exciting, but scary, is the way of saying it. And I think to keep the momentum going, it's going to be real important to be cognizant of what I'm talking about, or it'll get, you know,
On a shelf.
it will get on shelf, squashed, whatever word we use.
Chad?
Well, right in the center of town, I can tell you within the next 5 years, Mountain Mall is gonna have to change. We're gonna remodel down there also, so let's be just right in the V.
But it is absolutely critical, because I don't want to pick on any particular structure, which I'm bad about doing, but we probably have structures going up that may not be in character. And so I do think there's some, and I don't think the developers will object to some future building, hey, a little more stone or a little less this or whatever, to try to keep some better character. So, you know, anyway, I just think that, I don't want to hold him back, but I also think we need to be the stewards of making sure this doesn't get derailed before it gets started. I'm making it sound like it's going to be too restrictive.
Chad, I want your comments.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to it is I'm glad Robert brought out the point about the visitor, because it's, you know, we're definitely the business community, we're definitely the residents, but the ownership that our visitor has on Gatlinburg is huge. And, you know, a lot of times they refer to it as their own mountain town. And so when we're making changes to this, we're making changes to what they're seeing for the future. That and the continuing the education, I think the best way for the buy-in is to have that information always available, and using our outlets and the city and Seth's outlets and myself and the CBB's outlets to kind of communicate that to the general public and the residents as well as the visitors. So it's exciting times for sure.
Mm-hmm. And you know, speaking with Chad, I think you're excited about this. You're going to give us your best advice, best shot, and keep in mind all the things we're dealing with. And give us advice how we can go to the next phase of dealing with some of these things that are not in the scope.
Indeed. You know, I don't pull any punches, and I don't tell you what you want to hear. I tell you what you need to hear. And you know, some of this stuff is very thorny and problematic. And I think it probably is outside the scope. I also think that the community is going to have a hard time being sold that this is, you know, why are you doing this when this isn't important to me in my life? So it is important for us to explain what are the benefits of us dealing with community character and aesthetics downtown. And how does that relate to, you know, the pain that you might be feeling from, you know, housing issues or other kinds of stuff in your neighborhood? I think that's an important connection to try and make. I think there's a lot of smart people here, and I think as long as we keep communication open and keep sharing ideas, you know, I think we can solve these problems.
There are two things that, Mayor, that Chad said kind of in our brief debrief that we had upstairs. And one is he experienced a lot of passion today. The other is he experienced a lot of intelligence.
Yeah.
This is a community with a lot of smart people who care, who their hearts are full for Gatlinburg. And I just think that's a great way for this process to start, is for him to be exposed to what I think we already know that's here. If we can guide and massage that to a place that where we're deciding together this is where we need to be, I think we come out on the other side with a better Gatlinburg. And I was encouraged by your assessment of the groups that you met with today.
Greg, I'll leave it.
I'd just like to say, I know, I guess in the last year and a half, ever since the aesthetics committee was put together, I feel like we've been through quite a bit. And as each of those meetings were 2 hour plus, could have lasted 6 hours. And I can just see it on your all's faces now, as well as the last 2 days. And it's been so helpful to all of us, hearing from folks, but I agree so much with Robert, Logan, and Jackie and all of you, what y'all are saying is, and the mayor and I talked just briefly a little bit ago, just about what's went on in the last couple of days, and just as we did the lighting and the merchandise and the signage, you know, that was a big step to get it done. So I think that we're going to have to do things in phases, I think to Robert's point, because as we did in the aesthetics committee, we would start the meeting, but we might get off and talk about stuff for an hour and a half that we weren't even there doing. So I don't know if you could write a scope big enough unless we figure out how to phase everything that these stakeholders talked about, because we got to figure out, and the steering committee may need to get back together and us talk about, okay, based upon these 2 days, do we just need to sort of regroup to make sure where we want to be and where we're going and how we're going to get there? Is it phases, or what's the scope, so there's an understanding?
Real quick, I think, I hope this comes across the right way. I think the more you, Greg, and Mike, especially you, Greg, lead this more than Chad does, I think the better we're going to be off as a community. I don't mean that, because I think it's not like wait and see when he just comes upon. You're already doing more enforcement downtown, cleaning. I already feel some stuff going on. I think the more we ramp up that we're really trying to help improve Gatlinburg without that. We're even talking about changing regulations.
Sure.
Just all the things, bear proof of the dumpsters. Let's get more impetus behind that, you know, as we go. I think that'll be like a big wave that'll carry some of the harder things. It is cool now to see the bears are getting into all random kind of trash cans. And that's another thing not in his scope. But, you know, we're all running around right now. We just ordered 6, you know, they need a convention center. He's got to get to the convention center. You know, that kind of stuff the community's starting to rally behind. And it's hard to put the pressure on you, you know, but your leadership, I think, is going to be huge as well. So let's don't sit back and wait on him to solve all the problems, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, we appreciate all you people, every one of you, and everything you've done. I mean, it's huge. And people know, you know, we get input all the time. We're really glad that we're moving in that direction to elevate Gatlinburg. And that's what it's all about. So, till we meet again. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.